Good morning. With the help of Hashem, we are learning today's three parakim Rambam, Hilchos Masa HaKarbonos, the laws of sacrificial procedures, chapters Tez Zayin, Yud Zayin, and Yud Ches, 16, 17, 18. And we are starting with Perek Shisha Asar, with the 16th chapter, which is all about details in how one is obligated to fulfill one's obligation when it comes to karbonos, as we will see, Moededik. This chapter has 17 halachas, beginning with halacha al. Says the Rambam, Hanoider Godel, if a person vows to bring a large animal, vehevi katan, and the person de facto brings a small animal, as we'll give examples in a moment, lo yotza, that's not called the fulfillment of the vow. Aber, however, in the reverse, nadar katan, if a person vowed to bring a small animal, here's the key, and the person fulfills one's vow by bringing a large animal. Yes, yotza, gavaldik. Why? There's a rule, zelik, called Bechlal Mosayim Mana. Included in 200 is 100. So, for example, a person, I vow to give $100 to tzedakah. The person gives $200, they fulfill their vow because they gave $100. The fact that they gave another $100, even better. By animals, we say the same thing. One might have thought that, no, he pledged to bring a small one. He didn't bring a small one. We don't look at it that way. The big one has a small one in it. We, the adult, we have the child in us. For example, now we're going to just go back to what we learned in Perek Aleph. For example, if a person says Harei Elai Oilo or Shlomim, but he said, Keves, I'm going to bring a lamb. And as we learned above, a lamb, the word keves is the animal within the first year. The hevi ayol, and he brought a ram is a male lamb, but in the second year. Another detail, just to quickly review. We cannot bring this animal in its 13th month. So after the 13th month, that's already called a ram. That's a larger animal. Or should not that egel, person vows, I'm going to bring a calf. Okay, cattle, calf is the little one. Calf is until 1 year, and he brings an ox. Gedi, a kid, in the first year, the goat in the first year, and he brings a soid. Again, the animal in the second year. He brings a larger one. That's the word. Yatza, b'chlal masayim on halacha base. Nadar oilo min akivasim, oy min ha'elim, and he brings this palgas. That's the animal in the 13th month, which is nishtahed, nishtahin. And indeed, they need royim lo yotzo. And as we mentioned, that the bnei yoina has to be before it starts becoming gilded. The Torah is only after it's gilded. And he brought it b'tchilas hatziu. Was that when they started to become, when the feathers started to become gilded? Again, that's the in-between age. Again, harei sofek. Okay. Now, no dar shachar behavi lovin. A person vows to bring a dark animal, he brings a light-colored animal, lovin behavi shachar, or male animal, he brings a female, he brings a male. Since he specified something in his or her vow, and they did not do what they specified, they did not fulfill their obligation. And all of this is just to emphasize the chiddush that even though he made a vow to bring a cotton, a small one, and he brought a large one, yes, he fulfilled the obligation. Halachim. He made a vow without specifying the type of animal, large or small. So we say, maybe min hagadolim shebamin shana, that he should bring the more developed one. That's a very important rule. But if in that location, when you don't specify, the majority of the people de facto, by default, have some, then you have to bring, as people speak in this location, maybe Ka'anshi Hamakim, for example, Nadar Oila min Habakar. You use the word cattle, which is a very generic word, which can mean the egel, it can mean the shoir, yavi shoir. That's an example of the first part of Halacha Gimel that you should bring min hagedolim shebamin, or harei elai oila, im derech anshi hamakom likris oila stam afilu lo oila so oif He didn't say what type. But if their people use the word oila stam for a bird, maybe pereda achas, you bring one fowl, either a toyer or ben yoina. But in darkan shein koyin oila stam elul oila sam bakar. Oh, then it has to be bakar. Once it has to be bakar, we already said in the beginning of Halacha Gimel, you have to bring min hagadoilim shavamin. So then yavi shoyer. Now we're getting the gist of this chapter. Halacha Dalid mishanada shoyer. Person pledges to bring an ox, or to bring a ram, to bring a kevis, or to bring an egel. That means he did specify in that type itself, you have a frail or you have a strong. Don't bring the frailest of that type. And why would you want to do it? Because it's the least expensive. On the other hand, you don't have to bring the best, fattest. That there's mamash nothing greater than it. From that type, you have to bring the Beinani, the average one. Now, furthermore, the Rambam says, if the person brought HaKachush, the frailest one, you'll fulfill your obligation. If you said, I'm bringing a shoyer, and you bring the egel, you're not yoitze. If you bring the Kachush, but the evet, you are yoitze. Halacha hey ha'omer, if a person says, I'm bringing an ox worth of mana, and we see specified its value. So first of all, where is it worth the mana? From where you made the, you can't say, well, here it's worth less, but over there it's worth more. That's not what your vow meant. Another detail, animals, most of them come along with the nesachim, with the wine, flour, and oil. So the mana has to be for the animal aside of what you have to pay for the nesachim. And if you bring two animals worth the mana, so you spend the mana, but you said shoyd and you brought two, you're not yoitze. Because you have to fulfill that which you said. If a person says, however, shoyd is oila, not harei olai, which is a neder. If a person makes an adav of a vow, this shoyd is an oila, and later this shoyd, which you designated, gets a halachic mum, which demands of you to redeem it, and with its value to buy another animal, now, that's amazing. In other words, once you're chayiv to bring a specific ox, you fulfilled your obligation by making that nedava. Now, you have to bring it. If the animal gets blemished, there's no problem with you now substituting it for two. More than that, even if with its value you bring an ayo, not a shoyer, you're also yoitz. If a person says shnei shvarim elu oil, again it's in a dava, these two oxen are an oil, and the nafal behemum imratza yavi b'demei mechad, can go from two into one. Same concept, same premise. The halacha is based on the same rule. Ayil ze oil, and the nafal behemum imratza, you can bring with its money, you can go down to a keves. Im nodar keves. Now here is amazing. Now we're going back from a nadav into a neder. You make a neder, a lamb, and you designate a lamb. And now, if it becomes invalidated, you are allowed to bring a ram. Why? Based on the rule we had in the beginning of this chapter, because included in the ayol is the kevis. So you fulfilled your neder of a kevis by bringing the ayol. And you didn't specify the type, and you designated an ox, which is the largest type for an oila. And now, v'nigna, if it was stolen, in other words, why? Because you never made, while you made the neder, you never said a shoyd. You designated a shoyd, which is beautiful, okay? But now that you don't have it and you have to substitute it, you can bring a lamb. Omar shoyd zeh v'damav olai oila. Now, hukba means that this commitment is established as kavua, as binding. And now, if it became invalidated, you have to bring an ox. Beautiful, because you said shoyd zeh v'damav. In other words, if this shoyd will become damav, fighter, you have to bring a shoyd. One of my lambs are hegdish, or echad mishuvarai hegdish, one of my oxen is hegdish. If he had two, so which one did he have in mind? In other words, based on the klal that call hamagdish, ba'ayin yofa magdish. So if the options are little or big, he had in mind the big. What happens if he had three? So you have the big one, the little one, and the average one relative to it. So really, on one hand, I got hegdish. But on the other hand, maybe he had in mind the Beinani, because the call hamagdish ba'ayin yafa. But the Beinani, relative to the little, is the ayin yafa. So now there's really two animals. What do you do? Kate said, yeah, so you have to wait until the average animal, until he gets a blemish. And then the sachol hakadusha al hagodol levadoy. Beautiful. The im omar. But if he says, shoyr shebishvarai, an ox from my oxen is hegdish, this expression is more mashma that the best of the best, even if he had three, we don't have to wait for the Beinani. There's no suffix here. Agadol shabem hegdish vein choyshen lebeinani. Kevan my sakar banois pedek hezayin halachates. Pedek design halachates says that Rambam. Pereish echad mehem. If a person, when they made the pledge, they specified a specific animal, and then they forgot that specification. Or if someone's father told his son, listen here, Zunale, echad mehem hegdish, and the father didn't have an opportunity to tell the son which one, but one of them are. Now, again, Adeze Magdish Gadol Shebehem, Bacharkach Yetze Yedei Chayvasai, which is Gavaldik. Based on the rule we learned before that Kol Magdish Ba'anyan Yafa Magdish, and we don't have to be chayish that maybe he was Magdish the Beinani, which is Yafa regarding relative to the cotton. We don't say that. I'm bringing an oila, the person says from cattle, and v'kov anidrai, which means he designated an animal, and now he forgot what he designated. So what's the question in his mind? Okay, I said bakar. I don't remember im shoydam egel. Same concept. The bigger one. Chenim kava bakavasim, v'shakach makava yavi ayel. Kava be'izim v'shakach yavi soid. Shakach be'ezim min mahabehema kava ilah. He didn't remember whether he said min habakar. He specified the type, but he forgot. Now listen, now it's getting beautiful. If he specified, so based on the rule we learned in this chapter, once you specify, you have to bring that which you specified. You don't remember what you specified. You got to cover all the bases. What's all the bases? You have to bring an ox. In other words, you have to bring from the cattle. And from the cattle, you have to bring the ayin yafa, the bigger one, like we learned in this chapter. You have to bring lambs, rams, ayil, goats, or the soy. And more than that, if it's possible that you use the word oila for a bird, in the topically shema bo'if kabilasi, that also you have to bring a shoyd and an ayil and a soy, and either the toyd or the ben yoina la'oila. Halacha yud, no dar toyda ishlamim. Now, just to make it clear, both the toyda and the shlamim can come both from male and female gender. And v'kava nidrei babakar, and he remembered that you pledged to bring it from cattle. And v'shakach ba'mekavoi. In other words, you don't remember. Let's go bakar. You might have said egel or a par, right? Egel or shoyd, little or big. You don't remember. You might have said male or female, but you don't remember. So first of all, based on the rule of this chapter, you have to bring the larger one. The larger one is the par. But hold on. You don't remember whether you established male or female. Okay, so now you have to cover both bases, because if you said male, you have to bring male. If you said female, you have to bring female. So you have to bring a para or a para. The same thing is if you remember that the type was kavasim, and we already said in this chapter, you have to bring the ayil, but you forgot male or female. So the male large is called an ayil. A rachel, now you know, a rachel is the female adult in the second year, after the 13th month. The stopik loy bo'izim, here also, a kid, no, it has to be the second year of the goat. But male and female, sod and seira. Shakach be'ezim min kavanidrai, means you specify type and gender. You forgot, now you have to cover all the bases. What's all the bases? You have to bring both a par and a para and an ayil and a rachel and a sod and a seira. He Here, maybe Torah ben yoino. If you specified which one, you forgot whether it was the turtle dove or the young pigeon. Now you have to bring both. Same concept. Maybe Torah ben yoino. Halacha Yudalid. If a person says, "Harei olai lemizbeach," you forgot what? So it's amazing. From all karbanos, the one that is fully offered on the altar in its entirety is levina frankincense. Yavi kaimetz levina. She'elu chadav shekar lekulei lemizbeach kameishu el levina. It's amazing. And kevan and oila, the hide doesn't go on the altar. Other karbanos, from it goes on the altar. Frankincense, you don't take a kmitza. All of it goes on the altar. Now, you only donate a kmitza amount, but all of what you donate, so when you said harei olai lamizbeach, it's not about the value of, it's something that will fully be lamizbeach, frankincense. But if perish nidroim, and again, you forgot what you specified, then yavi mikol dover shekol of kol lamizbeach. Now, what would that include? For sure, an oila. Lefikach maybe oilas behema and oilas ha'oif. You can donate only the minchas nesachim and levoina and v'yayin b'fnei atzmai. Wow. Omar alach yud beis harei olai sel olam esbeach. In other words, I'm going to bring on the altar something that's worth a selah. The din is then bring a lamb, a baby lamb, a kevis. Why? And why is that, guys? We learned the average. It's because since when the Torah speaks about an ayol, right? We had this in Gemara Krisos Daf Yud Beis. An ayol has the value of 2 selah. An ayol is the adult, the ram, the adult lamb. So therefore, the average lamb is worth a selah. When we did the shechita here, we paid a lot more than a selah for the little shepselah. Peidish, v'shakach ma peidish. Now you got a problem. You remember you gave a number, but you don't remember the number. Oh, I'm sorry. So then, in other words, you said a selah, you specified something, not stam, but you forgot what. But bisela, then yavi bisela mikolav v'davar shekar lamizbeach. It's anything that can be bought in this location for a selah that goes on the altar, you have to buy. Now, if in this location even the egel is not to be bought for a seller, then you don't have to bring it. But any item that you can buy for a seller here, you have to buy. Halacha Yud Gimel. If a person says that he didn't specify how much, so then the rule is lo yifchais mikaimitz. And like we mentioned, all of it is worth. If you're going to bring more than a kaimitz, that will also be offered on the altar. A person says eitzim in the plural. Lo yifchais b'shnei gezarim, can't bring less than 2 logs. And these logs of the they're thick. They should be thick as a leveling rod. That's the thickness of those logs, and they should have the length of 1 amo. If a person says hareolai 8, which is in the singular, so then again maybe gezer echad orkoi amo. Another rule, then yavi. In other words, if a person says hareolai 8, he's not chayiv to bring 8. He's allowed to bring their value, because in the Beis HaMikdash there was a special kupa, if you remember, in which people would place the money for the eitzim, as we learned in Shkolim, and the Beis HaMikdash would use your money to buy the eitz. Halacha Yudalit. Misha Nadarin is not of Shemen. The person said Harei Olai Shem or Harei Zu Shemen. Keitzad Oisen Boy. So listen, guys, Koimitz v'menu Koimitz. He has to take a kemitza from the Shemen. Now I know when we learned this in the Gemara, everyone wonders, how do you take a kemitza from oil? Oil is a liquid. So first of all, there's 2 approaches. Either we're speaking about coagulated oil, but I remember also there's one opinion that says that a kemitza is more or less the quantity of 2 kizesim. So even though a kemitza is to be taken with the hand, but here it means the shear of the kemitza, shnei zeisim amount. And another din, everything that goes on the altar has to have salt added to it. V'nois and all of melach and v'zorkoi al gabe ha'ishim. And the remaining of whatever you donated, whether it's been netted or been a dava, is eaten by kohanim, like the other shiyarei benachas that comes from a Yisrael, that only a kemitza amount goes on the altar and the rest is eaten by the kohanim. If a person donates wine, how does it work? Here again, you put on it salt, even though la'achilas adam, I don't think salt is that good for wine. Not that I'm the big wine connoisseur. Try it out. But God has a different taste. Kaviyachol. And this is not, God forbid, to say this in a negative way, but we have so much in Chassidus about the meaning of achilas mizbeach. The Torah calls the karbanis lachmi, my bread. These are words that God says. Of course, God forbid, none of it is to be taken literally, but on the other hand, it's not just that Dibra Torah Kolosh B'nei Adam, but just one of the things that Alter Rebbe says beautifully is that what does food do? Food allows for the body and the neshama to merge. No, it's the neshama has the ability to give life. Yet we see that when Hashem decrees this neshama, the nefesh, the ruach is going into that person, including into that body. It can give life, but for the life to merge within the body needs to eat food. So in other words, for godliness to merge in the world, just to know the way Chassidus says it, there has to be karbanos. Another thing, it's time to remember, that the Rambam holds, and that we spoke about this, is a big machloikas, that other than in Chag HaSukkos, we're there since the Nisoch HaMayim happens on the bowls on top of the Mizbeach, so does the Nisoch HaYayin. The Rambam holds Bechlal that the Nisoch HaYayin goes directly on the Shisin. So the Rambam here l'shitasei. So Manaschoi Kuloi, not a certain amount of, all of it. Gabi Yashisin Kechol HaNesachim. What's amazing is that when the Rambam said before, if a person says Harei Lailam is Beyach and Allah Yudalev, Zak the Rambam, you bring a kaimitz of Levaina. Oh, because and here the Rambam, but that goes on the Mizbeach, that goes on the fire. Even though all of the wine goes into the shisin, but maybe the Rambam says it's not as great as Levaina in the context of Allah Yudalev because it goes into the shisin. Also, you put on it melach v'kol. Notes anything that's going has to have salt on it. Halacha tezvav, misha nodar neder, not a nedava but a neder lo yivien mimois ma'aser sheni. Even though, guys, remember that normally people would use ma'aser sheni to buy shlamim. Yeah, that's different. But if I made a vow, lachatchila, I have to fulfill my vow from chulin. Sharen is chayv carbon zeh, and v'cholam v'choiv carbon lo yavi carbon element achulin. Allah Zajac, hold on. Omar Harei Toida, and he says min achulin, but v'lachma min ha'maiser. Nah, that doesn't mean anything. Lo yavi lachma min element achulin, because the moment a person makes a neder v'carbon toida, automatically you chayv to bring lechem. If I toida nebal, it's too late. However, the final halach of this chapter, if a person who made the vow to bring a toida, for Omar, and he says right away, but I agree that the lechem will come in achulin. That specification that was made from the outset is okay. If he wants, now if heavy hakol men achulin yatsa, just to know the Rambam is really implying this is the theme of this chapter. You have to fulfill what you pledged. So even though there's a rule that when you make a neder, don't bring it from Mois Meiser Sheni. But on the other hand, since if you lachatchila, when you made the pledge, if you said Mois Meiser Sheni, it's okay. So lachatchila, fulfill your pledge. Lachatchila, don't bring it menachul. Chiddush is that if you bring it menachul and b'diavad yotz. Chein and peidish va'amar harei olai toida, and you say he v'lachma min ha'maiser, also yavi. Now v'layavi lachma mechita in meiser sheni. Don't bring it from the food itself. That not elamimois meiser sheni, because we want it to be like the animals. There's no animals meiser sheni. An animal of meiser sheni means you have money that you have in exchange of produce that now in Yerushalayim you will use for food and drink, including buying an animal for a carbon. Elamimois meiser sheni. V'yabehemosh imimois meiser sheni. Now va'af al pisha peidish yavi lachma min ha'meiser. And as we said, in the case where the animal also is coming min ha'maiser, you can bring, and you should bring lachatchila the maiser from mo'is maiser sheni, but you never mentioned the nesachim. L'yavi nesachem in mo'is maiser sheni. Why? She'ein ha'nesachim boim lo'olam. That's even more binding. Element achulin. Kamay shebi'arnu lefi shenemar parsha shlach v'hikriv hamakriv korbanoi l'Hashem, which means that the money of the Nesachim, that's the parsha of Nesachim, has to be fully his sacrifice. There should be no dimension of it that belongs to God, so to say, meaning if the money is Ma'aser Sheni, it's not fully his. Okay. Moving on to today's second chapter. Hilchos Masiach Rabbanos, the laws of sacrificial procedures, chapter 17. Now we're going to learn about obligations that one made regarding bringing a korban mincha, which is really the flour, the oil, and the wine. As we had in the previous chapter, how will one fulfill it according to exactly what one said when he made such a pledge? This chapter has 15 halachas, beginning with halacha aleph. Now, you have to first just quickly remember that there are 5 different types of a mincha offering. Hanoider mincha mafeitano says that the person specifies when they made their pledge, I'm going to bring the mincha, the one that's baked in the oven. So it has to be baked in an oven. Loyavi ma'afe kupach. Kupach is the range, if you remember, that has an opening for one pot. And even though people would also put stuff in it, but that's not called an oven. Nor v'loy ma'asera ofim. People used to bake stuff on rafters, if you remember, which means they would take stones, they would put the stones on fire. The stones would become mamish hot. And then they can take the stones off the fire, and for it's still burning hot, people sometimes would put some sort of flat pancake of dough on it, and it would make it into bread. That's called ma'aseh ra'afim. It functions, but that's not called ma'afei tanur. And finally, the Arabs would have pits in the ground, and they would sometimes cover the pits with mud, and inside those pits they would have wood, and they would also put in their dough. That's another way of breaking bread, but it's called yoiras ha'arbiyim, and it's not ma'afei tanur. In other words, just continuing behemshach to the previous chapter, that once you specify in your vow what you are bringing, you have to fulfill that which you specified. Halacha beis. I'm going to bring the type of mincha that's prepared in a flat frying pan. And he brings one that was prepared in the deep frying pan, or in the reverse. If he made the pledge b'marcheshes and he brings b'machavas, here, listen, mashehevi hevi, but v'idei choyvasoi lo yatsa. Again, you made a specification. The mincha is kosher. What, you can take a kamitza, you have to take a kamitza, the kahanim get to eat a shenayim, but you didn't fulfill your pledge. The im omar zu lohavi b'marcheshes. Here it's even worse. And behavi b'machvas, not harei olai, but zu oy b'machvas ve'b'marcheshes, harei zu psula, all together. It's not good. Not only you're not yoytze.
Rabbi, I'm sorry. If you just say, I'm going to bring a mincha offering, do you have to bring all 5? In all cases, if you just say...
No, the Rambam is going to say clear. We'll see in a second. The only time you have to bring all 5, Kevin, is that when you know that when you made the vow, you specified one of the 5, and now you don't remember. The Rambam is going to write it later. If a person says that they're like, Shnei esroi nois. By the way, the minimum shear of a mincha is 1 isara. 2 esroinos, to bring them in 1 keli. And you said when you made when you said the neder, you said to bring it in 1. And you bring it in 2, or when you made the nether, you say you're going to bring him in 2 kelim, and you brought him in 1. So here again, it's not so bad that it's puzzle. No, it's a kosher mincha, but you did not fulfill your obligation. Masha hevi, but v'dei chavasel yotzom. Shenemar, as it says in Parshas Kiseitze, that kasher nadarto l'Hashem alekecha. You got to do exactly as you pledged. Halacha gimel. Also, Elul, not harei olai, which is the nether, now by a nedava. This will be brought b'keli echad. This. Now, like we learned in the previous halacha beis, if you said this b'machavas, if you bring it b'marcheshes, not only were you not yoytze, it's possible. Same thing over here. Behavi b'shnei kelim. Elu lo havi b'shnei kelim b'keli echad. That elu completely psulim. Now, here we go, Kevin, building up to what you asked, but it's an orderly buildup. Loi kavon b'shas neder. Not he forgot. He never specified what he would bring. What did he say? He didn't say 1 or 2 kalim. Even though when he designated these 2 esroinos, he initially did it in 2 kalim. That doesn't do anything. It doesn't define his pledge. If later, for whatever reason, he put it into one keli, it's mamish good, and he fulfilled his pledge because kasha nadarta. No, what you have to do what you said when you made the pledge. What you did when you set aside doesn't define anything. And he said to bring in one keli, and he brings it in two kelim. And then they tell him, the keli yachad nodarta, what are you doing? The ikriva b'shnei kelim, now it's even worse. Even though harei olai, harei elu psulim. In other words, since when they told him, you said in one keli, he didn't respond to that, which means enachanami. And he thinks that this is for that. Not good. Then eluk shedim. And you fulfilled your obligation. In other words, he listened. You're right. I thought I said b'keli yachad. So now I'm putting it into one keli. Good. Allah chadal. Omer arei lai shnei yisroi nois. Lohavi b'shnei kelim. And he brings it b'keli yachad. The opposite. And they tell him, no, b'shnei kelim nodar. So now he divides it into two kelim. Arei eluk shedim. But if he further only brought it in one keli, now it's amazing. Here it's different. He admitted that he said in two keli. But we have to go back and we have to remember, guys, what were to happen if me and you bring a mincha, kevan, and they get mixed up at some point. So we learned another thing, that since we're speaking about the dough or something that's already baked, if they're not completely mixed, which means that even though they are in one keli, if the kohen can see what is from one, what is from the other, and when he takes a kemitza, which he has to do, he knows that the kemitza is from this one and then another kemitza from the other one, that's okay. As long as you can make a kemitza from each onesie sudden, with knowing that no one, the other ones is not mixed into this, b'diavad, it's okay. Halacha. He didn't specify from the outset which one of the five. Guys, just a chazer. The five is soilis, machavas, marcheshes, chalois, and akikim. These are the five. So he gets to bring one of the five. And let's go further. If he says in the plural, harei olai min nachos, he has to bring two. Yavei shnei mini minachos. So minachos means two types. In other words, he can't bring two soilas. He has to bring one. The Rambam is saying, shnei mini minachos mechamish. If he says, harei olai min minachos, I vow to bring a type. But he said minachos. Amazing. So he has to bring two, but he said one type from one type. If he says minei minachos, then he has to bring shnei menachos mishnei minim, which means, by the way, one from each, not two from each, one from each. Minei mincha, minei mincha. Even though he said mincha, yeah, but it doesn't matter. He said minei. He has to bring two types because he said two types. Kava nidroi b'min echad. Here we're going. That's your thing, Kevan. A guy made an edit. When he made a pledge, he knows he specified which one of the five. Now it's like last chapter. I specified which animal type. I just don't remember which one. I got to bring, the part. Ein hayachid maybe mincha bekele yechad yoser mishishim yisarim. We learned this. That the largest amount of flour that you are allowed to bring in only one keli is 60 esroinos. Because don't forget, guys, with the flour, you would always bring one loaf of it. You have to mix the oil with the flour. And even though the rule is that even if you didn't mix it, it's okay, but that's only okay if it was mixable. And if you have more than 60 esroinos, one loig of oil cannot get mixed into 60 plus. So first of all, the most is 60. Now, therefore, if a guy says, I'm going to bring 61 esroinos, you have to bring in two kelim. You don't have an option. Even though there's a mishisha, maybe a shisha mekeli yachad. You get to bring 60 in one, and vashar mekeli sheni. Why? Because of this rule. The most that is mixable is 60. Abel Yasad al Shishim Ein Nivulalam, you won't be able to mix that loig into more than 60. You actually don't even have to really mix it, but Amru Chachamim, you don't have to mix it. And that's okay only if you could, if it's fit to be mixed. We have this in so many areas in halacha. We keep on mentioning. We have this in today. When a woman today goes to the mikvah, if she has a chatzitza in her mouth, that's a problem. She doesn't have to open up her mouth under the waters of the mikvah. I know, but it has to be ra'ui. Halacha zayin. Omar, I'm going to bring 121. Same concept. So the max is 60. Have to have 3 kelim. So maybe esrim b'shnei kelim, 60 and 60. Shishim b'chol keli. And now you said 121. So maybe yisod echad bakli hashlishi. And now Omar harei yisorain. Yisorain is in the singular. You bring 1 yisorain. From what type? We already learned before. If you never specify the type given, you get to pick which one of the 5. Another rule. We don't say since you didn't specify, you bring 1 billion. No, we bring the minimum of 2, which is 2. Now it gets juicy. If you paid a shnidroi, you did specify the quantity, but you forgot what was the quantity. So then we presume that you specified the largest quantity you can bring in 1 keli. Now, if you forgot 2 things, you forgot Kama Yisrael Perish, so we said in that case you have to bring 60, but you also know that you specified which one of the 5, but you forgot which one. You have to bring 60 Yisrael from Soilis, from Machmas, from Archeshes, from Chalois, and from Rikikin, Mechamishton. Alocheches, Kovan Nidroi. You established the quantity, the shachach kama isroi nois nadar. But the problem here on halachiches is that you also specified how many kelim. See, before in halachazai, you never say how many kelim. So we get to presume you only meant 1 keli. We don't know the amount, so we say the largest, 60. If you specify the kelim, you know what can be kaven? It could be you said 1 asar in a keli. Could be you said 2 asroinis and 2 kelim. We don't know. So now we have to cover that base. The chama kelim nadar. You have to bring 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 until 60. And maybe me'echad v'ad shishim, and each one in its own keli. The shishim keli. Guys, don't forget. That's the message from here. Ketzad. Maybe yisod echad the keli echad, and also shtei asroinis b'keli shem, and also shlosh asroinis b'klei shishi. Now, if you add to that the person knows he specified which one from the 5, and if you got that, you got to do that with all 5. Then maybe Allah say there's a shishim kelim mikol min, then imsa maybe mikol min. Well, you just know what the number is. It's elef ushmoina meyois ushloshim isan. That's the number of adding 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, etc. Okay, halacha 9. Ha'omer harei olai min chasa oidim. Now, guys, here we're getting really into semantics. First of all, was either korban yachid soita, and which she brings it from barley, but you cannot donate a soita korban, or communal do'omer. Other than that, a pledged mincha is never from barley. Now, when you said minchas soidim, it's clear that the word mincha is not a standalone statement, and then you added the detail, but from the outset you defined what mincha, and what you said it doesn't exist, is unacceptable. Or if you say minchas, in contrast to mincha, minchas chatzi isarim, and as we learned, a donated mincha minimum has to be 1 isarim. No, it's you pledge something that does not exist. Oy, minchas, not mincha, but minchas without shemen and levaina. And I know that when it comes to the minchas kanois, again, but that's not something you can pledge. A donated mincha comes with oil and it comes with levaina. So since you made something that does not exist, that's not acceptable. because shaloi is nadav davar shekamay makriven. I'll give you an example. If a person says harei olai to bring a lion for a carbon, no, there is no lion as a carbon out. But if you didn't say minchas sa'oidim, but you said mincha sa'oidim, so perhaps you really pledged mincha. Maybe you meant that. And then you added the detail. When you make a pledge, and then you add a detail that's unacceptable, we discount the detail, but we don't take away the pledge. So mincha sa'oidim is one statement. You have to know a Lashon HaKodesh. Mincha shel sa'oidim could be interpreted two ways. That's the question. Mincha min ha'sa'oidim or mincha min ha'adashim. Gives another example. Made out of lentils. I mean, it doesn't matter. There's no such a thing. Even though, again, there is sa'oidim in the Beis HaMikdash, but not in the context of a pledge. So as far as a pledge is concerned, barley and adashim and quinoa is all the same thing. Doesn't exist.
Who's the Kohen who's asking these questions?
No Kohen. A guy made a pledge. No one is asking. Someone made a pledge. And then
I thought he had said
very good. Someone in the Beis HaMikdash that's learning. The Rav in the Beis HaMikdash. In other words, we have a doubt what those words mean. Sometimes you get to ask the person. Im amar loy nodarti elo al das shemut lahakrif kozeh. But the ilu yodati she'em akriv and elo yisod and shalom. Or I know if I would have known it has to be soilus. If I would have known that it has to be b'shem and levonim, I never would have made a pledge. In other words, he's saying I meant mincha sa'odim. That's what I meant. And if I would have known that you can't, I wouldn't have. Then it becomes like the ratio of Allah Chetes. But because I really never dasken meant the detail was only a detail. I meant to pledge a mincha. Then which is amazing. No, that is what do you do with that? So you can't discount. No, if a guy says minchas chatzi minchas, then it's nothing. Here you're saying and the sudden you could bring. The other half is the problem. And va'amar, and by the way, it has to be mincha shel, just to make that clear. It has to be, it's not minchas, because then it also would be nonsensical. But he says, mincha shel isaronu mechze, so shoyel enoisei. They ask him. And va'amar ilo yisi yadeya, or yisi noidi kederach shem hames nadvim, which means, just to make it clear, Kevan, he never goes back. He's not going back. Not I would have said two. I would have said two, not 1.5. That's what he's saying. Then he should bring two. Omar, kemach. Kemach is coarse flour. There's no carbon from coarse flour. It's always fine flour. Or chatzi yisadain. And here's a new thing. He never even said mincha. Then you don't ask. There's nothing to ask. He said nothing. There's no such thing. Zevach b'loy nesachim. Zevach b'loy nesachim and the midbar. Machloikas tanoim. Once we entered Eretz Yisrael, no way. Harei potter. Interestingly, again, toida b'loy lechem could be understood. His foundational intent was to bring a toida. Then he gave a detail. Then he gets to clarify. And if that is what he clarified, that is a chayv lavik derech shamakriven, then he brings a toida with lechem. He brings the zebach with the nesachim. Halacha Yudalef. What does he mean? So we say he meant to bring the animal and the bread because shahadavar yudua she'em akriven lechem olay toida. Why didn't he mention the carbon? The sefer carbon hiskir. Oh, he only mentioned the end. He meant included in the end they have it. But if it was clear, harei olay lechem liftor todas shoploining. I only want to pledge. I'm pledging the bread for someone who's bringing an animal. I will pay for their bread. Clearly, he didn't have in mind the carbon. That is okay. Because also, he's not saying for him. He's linking it to a carbon. He's saying for someone else's. Then Yavi Lechem Toide im Toides Chaveiro. Will someone agree? Depends. Some people say, I want to bring the Toide, I want to pay for my own bread. But you wait until someone is open to having this type of partnership. Halacha Yud Beis. Misnadev Adam Wine can come both as an adava, harezu, or as hareolai. However, the ein misnadvim loig yain shnei lugen cannot donate the amount of one or two. Why? Because since when you bring an animal, guys, we learned this, so remember the rules. When you bring a lamb, comes with 3 loig. When you bring a ram, comes with 4 loig. When you bring a cattle, an ox, comes with 6 loig. These are the numbers the Torah gives. So if you want to make a stand-alone carbon, it has to have those numbers or a compilation of those numbers, as we'll see in a moment. So 1 second. So I said I can donate 3, I can donate 4, I can donate 6, but I cannot donate 5. Because what would 5 be? 3 plus 1. I'm sorry, 3 plus 2. There is no 1, there's no 2. Because she'ein chamesh is lugim d'oyim, not lenischa behema achas, lenischa shtei behemois. What are we getting at? I could donate 3, I could donate 4, I could donate 6. 3 would be again what would normally come with the kevis, what which was come with the ayil. The shisha comes with the egel or with the pod. Now, what's beautiful is that once I'm making a donation more than 6, every number is acceptable. Why? Because the Rambam is going to show you how every number can be. If I would have brought 2 of those types of animals, it would have come to 7. It would have come to 8. It would have come to 9, as we're going to go through a couple of examples. I could make a pledge. For example, a person says, I am pledging standalone wine, but 6 for sure, 7. Now, what would 7 now? 7 cannot be from the ox, because the ox already eats up 6. But you know how you can get to 7? Tell you, a lamb and a ram, 3 and 4. No, but since there is such a number that could come with animals, that is where I can make a standalone pledge.
Any combination of 3, 4, and 6
Any
is allowed.
combination, we'll see. The Rambam says, the Mishnah says this. Anything once you're 7 above, any number. The Rambam is not going to go through every number, but look at this. If a guy says 8 actually can be like 2 elim, 4 and 4. If a guy says 9 already can come together with 2 options, because it can either be like the nesachim of an ox, which is 6, and of a kevis, 6 and 3 is 9, or it can be kenischei shloisha kavasim. If you bring 3 lambs, 3 times 3 is 9. If a guy says 10, yeah, I'll tell you how you get to 10. Either like the nesachim of an ox, which is 6, and an ayil or ram, 6 and 4 is 10, or shnei kavasim, kevis is 3 times 2 is 6, and then an ayil. Okay, that's it. The Rambam says, 11, any number will work that way. Halacha Yudal. No dar chamesh lugim. Now here's the issue. So you can't make 5. But if you remember, guys, when a guy says he's Soran Umertzen, Halacha Yud. So remember, there is a time that he brings 2. Here also, if he made 5. So some of what he said is good. No, 1 or 2 is garnished. 5, no, 3 he could have pledged. 4 he could have pledged. So they tell him Ashlim Shisha. No, it's add. Why Shisha? Because Shisha is then a chasim of a sachim of a shirt. Sharei kava on the carbon. That's the word. Because some of what he said is good. But if he made loig oishnayim garnished, we don't say add 1. Nothing of what he said is valid. Patish harei einam ru'im klal. Loy hein v'loy miksason. The ein misnadvim. Now, Atkan was wine. Now let's go to oil. Oil, we do have the 1 isaran. Like we mentioned, 1 isaran is mixed. 1 loig, of shemen is mixed with 1 isaran, 1 loig for 2 asrainas. That's the number by the oil. The aim is not pachas melega shemen. She'ein lo chamincha puchusa mi isaran. And even if it's only an isaran, it needs to have a loig echad shemen. So that number now you can pledge 2, you can pledge 3, you can pledge as many as you want, but not less than 1. Final halacha of this chapter, halacha tezvav. Zok the Rambam ho'imed. And he didn't specify an amount. So we had this before. Why do you bring the minimum amount? If he says shemen, and here, if he specified a quantity and he forgot, either he forgot whether it's yain or shemen. So listen to the numbers, kevan. What would you do now? So by Yisodin, we said, okay, bring 60. That's the most you bring. By the animal, we say, I bring the large type, bring from the cattle. And from the cattle, bring the ox. We learned in the last chapter, you forgot male or female, bring both male and female. What do you do over here? Like, where's the limit? So look at the number. You bring 141 of loik. How did we get to 141? Because more than the first day of Chag HaSukkos. Chag means Chag HaSukkos. Because if you remember, by Musaf, you have the 13. You have the most amount of oxen. And that day, the Nesachim will be 141. Both 141 oil, same number, and the 141 wine, as we learned in Ilchas Tivnim Musaf. So again, we assume that a person would not vow a larger amount. So at least there is a limit, which is a big amount, but that's the limit and not limitless. Chavre Hilchos, Meiser Korbanos, the laws of sacrificial procedures, Perek Shmoina Asar, the 18th chapter. We're completely changing the topic of the previous chapters. Now we're going to be learning about the prohibition of shechting a korban outside the Beis HaMikdash, another prohibition of offering up a korban outside the Beis HaMikdash. We're going to see when the Isur is chal and when the Isur is not chal. This chapter, chapter 18, also happens to have 18 halachas, beginning with halacha Aleph, says the Rambam. Kol karbanos kulam. All karbanos. Bein karbanos behema, whether it's a carbon from fowl, va'oif, bein karbanos v'nachos. First of all, there's a positive commandment to bring them exclusively in the Beis HaBchira, in the chosen house. Shenamar, as it says in Parshas today, Shom Tased, only there, meaning only there you should do Koil Asher Anoichi Mitzaveka. Chein Mitzvas Asei Liyos Kol Adam Metapol Maybe Karbanis Behema. If a person made a pledge, even if the pledge was made outside of the Holy Land, but once you designated an animal, you're obligated to make the effort to take that animal, even though you're coming b'chutz la'aretz, and to bring it in the Beis HaBchira. Shenamar, as it says, Rak Kodoshecha, only your sacraments, Asher Yiolacha, that you have, and your nedarim, you have to tisa ubasa, you have to carry it and bring it to the place. That this pasuk, you would think, I'm so far away. No. Doesn't matter. Once you have the designated animal, you have to make the effort. You have to be metapel. So first of all, there's a positive commandment to bring the carbon there. Now let's go on the negative. Halacha base. Hamakriv carbon chutz la'azara. Not only were you mevatel mitzvah saseh, but also, God forbid, ba'avar aloy saseh. Shenemar, he shomer, take heed. Remember, he shomer. Al, pen is a love. L'cha, pentaloi lisecha. Anywhere you decide. Okay, now, what type of penalty does this love carry? Here we start. The imikriv amazed. Hikriv means you offered it. We'll go into details in a moment. Yechayv kares. Where do we have the punishment? Shenemar and Parsha. In Parshas Achrei Mois. Ashe yala oila oy zevach. But El Pesach, oil moy loy vienu lasis oisel Hashem, then v'nichnas oisha ma'amo. And now we have the klal. Any law for which yechayev kodes b'meisid, yechayev chatas kavua b'shoigig. The mikra b'shoigig maybe chatas kavua.
What's the punishment if you don't bring it at all?
Then you violate of don't delay your vow.
So isn't it better not just to bring it? Not
Of course. Yeah. Now, when we're speaking about being maked of it, it means bringing it up on a altar. Aside of that, there is a lav of shchita, not to confuse the shchita as chutz, called halo as chutz. Halacha gimel. Chen hashoichet kacha. Something was already mugdash and you shechted it, God forbid, chutz la'azara, even if you never burnt it on an altar, but you shechted it l'shem karban. Here also, if a person did it mezid chayv kares, where do you have that shenemar? Asher yishchat. The problem is just the shechita in itself, whether it's a shoyd or whether it's a kesev or an ace, ba'machane, or yasher yishchat, etc. Dam yechashav leishahu, clearly, dam shafach v'nichras. And therefore, if you shechted it without knowing that it's asur, then you're chayiv chatas kavua. Halacha dalet. Hold on, you only quoted the pasuk in Achrei Mois, right? That speaks about the punishment. Where is there the lav? Heichen is it al shchita machutz? Interestingly, there's only a hekesh. Since it says, going back to the pasuk in 8, Sham Tala Oiloi Secha, and it says Sham Tasik Choil Asher Anoichim Mitzaveko. So we're making a hekesh from a positive commandment. Maho Aliyah Bachutz. Sho'ana Sholel. When it comes to Hakrava, we just quoted the pasuk. Hishamer. We had a lot of it. He's at all of the Federation of Marishon Chabanallah Yisecha Gavaldik Af Asiya. What's the Asiya? Which is the Shchita, including the Shchita. And there we have our oynish. We just quoted the pasuk that v'nichras hareyu muzar oleo. It's amazing. The lav, the hazaras from a hekesh because of the rules. Shalei anash hakosav elam kenis. Halachei hashoichet kachim veheloisam achutz. If a person did both, person shechted the kachim and then he put them on an altar, all outside the right place, then you start a chayv shtayim. You know, if he did it b'shoigig, he has to bring two chatois, achas ala shchita v'achas ala Allah, and more. If he shechted it b'fnim. That means he did the shechita good, and then he offered it or he burnt it bachutz, he'll be chayv on the law. And the same thing in reverse. If he shechted it bachutz, even though he brought it on the altar b'fnim, you'll be chayv only for the mamish separated lavim, and if you do them both together, you're chayv shtayim. Halacha vav. Now, hold on. Eino chayev elo al shchitas kachim that were ru'uyin to go on the altar. Aval ha'shechet bachutz echad misurim mizbeach. After we learned all of these series of halachas. Or something that, the halacha l'meish mesina, you have the chatois ha-mesois. They have to be put into the keep and left to die. And you offered it back since that was something that was not allowed to be brought. Harei potter. We're not saying you did a good thing. We're saying you're not going to be chayv kodesh, you're not going to be chayv chatas. Shenemar lifnei mishkan Hashem. In other words, and you brought it outside, then you're chayv kodesh. Kol she'en roi ala mishkan Hashem. Taka ein chayav and Allah. So very good. Now that we have this halacha vav, now let me ask you a question. What happens if there is a carbon that inherently is good? Problem is that there is a time factor. You can't bring it yet because it's not 8 days old. Now there's a time factor that involves the animal. There's a time factor that involves the owner. The Rambam will give examples for each. Even though both of these things with time will be resolved, still you'll be exempt, because if you brought it at the time that you cannot bring it b'fnim, you'll still, at least you're not going to be chayv kodesh or chatos. Hoyel ve'ein roy lovei ata b'fnim potter. Now let's just explain, what does it mean that there's a time factor regarding the animal or a time factor regarding the owner, which does not yet allow you to bring it? So the Rambam gives examples for each one. That's easy. Any animal that's still within its 7 days of birth, or when it comes to the bird karbonos, so toirim have to be dafka adults, so they are before even the beginning of them becoming gilded. Or another great example, which is not only connected to kachim, but you cannot shech the oisoy vesbenoi on the same day. One of them was slaughtered on that day, which means the other one cannot be brought. You can't do shkita until tomorrow. Now, halachat 9, the ezem chusas man baba olim. Korban shadayin legias man ba'olav, like the owner cannot bring it. What is example? Yobaldi, Azav, Azava, or Yoledis. They only bring their korbanes after they counted 7 days. They have to bring it on the 8th day. What happens if they bring it during their count? So they were not obligated yet. They're peturin. Or another example, a mitzoida. Sheshachat chatosi v'ashamay b'toichimei asvira b'chutz pater shadayin loy niru ba'alei akorbanes el lekapar. Now the Rambam writes a nuance over here. Now these people that bring an oilo. Now I know that the oilo of the Mitzvah, has to come after he counts the 7 days on the, later. But don't forget that an oilo is an animal that could be brought as a donation carbon. So that's not good. It's going to work against them here. Even though they did it, yes, chayavim. Since oilo doirin, and a doirin could be brought standalone. Different chatas and the asham, they are the main kapara. And since it was b'toichimei asfira, that's where we have at least the exemption of what? That it was a mechusas man bid ba'olim. Now, the chein nazar, another example. A nazar has to bring 3 karbanes, right? So if he brings the chatas b'chutz during the days of Nazirus, will be pater. Interestingly, if the nazar brings either the oila or the shlamim also can come as a donation. B'chutz chayiv, because shachatos siyam akeves oisoi. And the oila and the shlamim could be viewed as a standalone donation carbon. Allah Yud, Asham Talui, which to begin with you're bringing because you don't know. The Chata So'oif, Abal Asafik. This is the only carbon that can come on a Safik is a Chata So'oif. In other words, you don't even know if you're Chayiv. Even though you have to bring it. If you shechted it, Bachutz Pater. Because Sharei Loi Nikva Ho Isser. Asham Et Soiroi.
Sorry, by Potter, do we mean he still has to bring another one, correct?
By what? By what?
Okay, when we say he's Potter, he still has to bring another korban at the right time.
Of course, that's the beauty. Right. No, it's even though you're chayiv to bring an asham taloi, but to be chayiv kares, you can't do that. You have to bring another one with him. Yes, very good. Asham mitzoyra. That we said that's one of the shashachti bachutz shaloi lishmoi. Now we're starting a whole new topic. So you have to remember the first Mishnah in Zevachim that all of the karbanos, other than a chatos and a pesach, if it was shachted shaloi lishmoi, means for another carbon. The carbon is kosher, even though the owner did not fulfill their obligation. By chatas and pesach, the carbon is not kosher. So since the carbon is kosher, now you'll be chayiv. Chayiv. Now the Rambam says, "V'chol carbon shu pater al shchitasi b'chutz," because it was not to the oil hamizbeach, as we began on halacha vav and zayin and ches and tes, etc. Kachu pater al halo osoi. Now let's give other manifestations of this halacha. Halacha Yud Aleph, Shnei Seirei Yom HaKippurim. So if you remember, you have the two seirim that ideally have to be equal in height and equal in appearance and equal in value, and then you make the lottery. Now, if you shechted both of them bachutz, don't forget, one of them, once the lottery is made, is not going to be shechted b'fnim. It's taken to the azaz. So if you shechted it bachutz, shelo hisvada aleim. Look at the irony. Then we say chayv kares al shneim hoyel uruuyim lavi lifnei Hashem levidui. But no, this is the chiddush. Even though the soida mishtaleach is not going to be offered in the Beis Hamikdash, so it's not about the lottery. But since it has to have vidui said on it, and the vidui that the Kohen Gadol says on it is lifnei Hashem, it's not that you said vidui by chutz, you shechted it by chutz. You're going to be chayv kares. But now there's no other avodah that's going to be done b'fnim. Now you're pater ala mishtaleach because none of it is Rabbi loy levnei Hashem. Gavaldik halacha yud beis shoichet shlama machutz. But when before you opened up the gates of the heichal, and if you remember, we just learned this on Perek Hey that you're not allowed to bring a shlamim prior to the opening of the gates, and that's called, interestingly, the opening of the gates is something that has to happen. There is a deed that's lacking. So harei hein mechusar ma'isa, and only after a ma'isa are they ru'uyim likrav lifnei Hashem, which is why you'll be pater. Kamoi shebi arno. Now let's go back. We mentioned from the first Mishnah in Zvachim that a chatas and a pesach. What about a pesach? So when do we say that a pesach that is offered shaloi l'shmoi is not even kosher? That's only if it's brought bisman. A pesach shaloi bisman is connected to a shlamim. So v'ashoichet as a pesach b'chutz. Afilu b'shari yemois hashana. Bein l'shmoi, bein shaloi l'shmoi. I want to make it clear that we're not talking about a pesach bismanoi b'chutz shaloi l'shmoi. A pesach bismanoi b'chutz shaloi l'shmoi is completely invalid, so you won't be chayiv. And I'm speaking about all other scenarios. Then you will be chayiv because a pesach b'shari yemois hashana is shlamim. Halacha Yud Gimel behemas chulin she'ubara kachem mizbeach. What's geshen, guys? Like this, you have a chulin animal, guys, that's pregnant, and the person consecrated the fetus. Now the mother was never consecrated. While the animal is still carrying it, says that if you shechted the animal b'chutz, you're chayiv. I'm sorry, not chayiv. You're not allowed to do it. You're not allowed to shech the animal. Why? Because shechting the animal bachutz is as if you're shechting the fetus bachutz. The fetus was consecrated. But are you going to be chayiv? No. Because you can't bring the mother. It's beautiful.
If you consecrated the mom, the fetus is included, correct? Automatically?
Yes, but here was the opposite.
Right. Just asking.
If a person ganvid an animal, vehigdish, and he consecrated the animal, and then he brought it bachutz, he's going to be chayiv. Now hold on, that has to be clarified because there is a point where if the animal doesn't belong to you, you cannot consecrate it. So let's see where we live. It's as if it belongs to him, but that is limited. Enough all of kadis, says the Rambam. That's only misha'a shehikdisha. Now, the case was the owner had yush. You consecrated it. Okay. In other words, like this. Here's the chiddush, guys. If you were magdish the animal before yush, did you own it to be magdish it? No. But here's we say, if you shechted it bachutz after yush, since during the time of shechita it was considered yours, that's the chiddush here. For this, we say retroactively, it's yours enough for you to be chayv kados. No, it's like this. If the animal, a person gambled it, and there was yush, so you have yush and shina reshus. Of course, if now you're magdish it and you're shechted bachutz, there's no chiddush. You're chayv. That's the word. There is a certain window where, again, you were magdish it prior to yush. If you shechted it la'achar yush, it's considered yours for you to be chayv. Allah it as well. What happens if the body was outside, but the neck was inside, and you shechted it? You shechted the neck inside. Chayav. Shenemar ash yishchat shoir oy chesev oy eis b'machane oy ash yishchat michutz lamachane. This pasuk means echad ashoichet b'mikdash is problematic if the rest of the body is bachutz, or the body is inside and the neck is bachutz. In both cases, you're chayiv. In other words, when are you doing the right thing? When all of it is inside. But however, if you shech the animal on the roof of the Beis Hamikdash, even though it's not a place that's fit for shechita, as we learned in Perek Hey, you did not do it chutz la'azara. This chapter is shechitas chutz. The roof of the Beis Hamikdash is not chutz. Halacha tezayin, shnayim shachazu b'sakin. If two people holding on a knife and they shechted it together b'chutz, they are peturin. Why? Because the Torah in this lav says the words asher yishchat, who will slaughter, or asher yishchat, or who will slaughter. That is implying that the isud for which you're going to get penalized is only if one. Now, if there was one that did the shechita, here's the word. You didn't do it for God. Nevertheless, it is a chayv. And that's the meaning when the Torah adds the words, dam yechashev leishahu dam shafach. Not superfluous. The Torah is coming to include afal pi shezeh hadam b'machshavtoi. The person didn't even do it l'shem kachim. He did it l'shem chulin. The big difference between kachim and chulin is by kachim, the blood is holy. By chulin, the blood is not holy. You have to cover it. That depends. Chayev oifya behemanat. It's called dam nishpachim. You had in mind kadam nishbach, well, like a carbon doesn't matter. You shechted kacham achutz, you're going to be chayiv. Allah yudzay. Now, hashechet bachutz balayla is layla. You can't shecht in the Beis Hamikdash. Chayiv. Wow. Why? Because since v'hashchita balayla ksheira bachutz. Now, guys, you have to appreciate the chiddush here. Shchita bachutz kevan is good only by chulin. Yeah, but you're shechting this bachutz. Even though it's kachim. Bachutz, there's no such a thing as day and night. Another detail. If you burnt it up balayla, even from the animal that was shechted bachutz, in the Beis Hamikdash, if you shecht the animal balayla, you can never bring it up. You won't be exempt. You'll be chayv both. Aval, however, if you shechted it inside the Beis Hamikdash at night, and now you bring it up on the altar outside, now you'll be pater. Because shchitas pnim balayla is not good. Lefisha lehela levar apostle. She'ein locha shchit k'shera balayla v'mikdash ever. Similarly, chenim kima b'klei chayil b'fnim. Means once you did something b'fnim that invalidated it to be brought b'fnim, and now you sprinkled it b'chutz, you're going to be potter. However, if you were shechted an animal kevan, and you were makabel it b'klei choil bachutz, you will be chayiv for sprinkling the blood. And the final halacha yudches. Let's go to malika. Now remember that malika, which is the way they would, so to say, decapitate. They would be moilek, a bird. That is something that if you do that outside the Beis Hamikdash, outside the context of a carbon, you make the bird into an avela. So here also, if you were moilek the bird bachutz, it's amazing. You're going to be potter. That's not called an akdash. I am the Beis Hamikdash. That's the way to do it. I know that, but you did it bachutz. And therefore, you were chayiv for malika. And if you burnt it up, you're going to be potter. But if malak bifnim and now v'hela bachutz chayiv alallah. Now the same thing in the reverse. If you shechted it bifnim, a bird is never slaughtered bifnim. So what? So you look at where you did it. If what you did, where you did it, is not valid, now it's not. Now it's spotted. Once it's not allowed to be brought on the mizbeach. Now if you bring it bachutz, you'll be potter also. V'lo bachutz potter because shaloi hela elodavar she'einu roi likrav. But if you shechted the bird outside, shechted it. Yeah, that's the problem. Shechita outside is a problem. And then you brought that up achutz, yechayv shtayim. Because since shechita bachutz k'sheira, it's as if you did malika b'fnim. Givaldik, to be continued.
Milika is the one you do with your thumb, right?
With